Now, for the sake of argument, let's just say, let's take the individual whose blood we have been discussing, as I brought up last week and the week before. Let's take them to be the intended messenger of the living God. Let's take them to be the intended messenger of the living God. And taking that individual to be that intended messenger, let's jump to Deuteronomy 18 and 18, which I will read. I'll raise them up a prophet. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth. He shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. Now, what we are reading here, we are actually reading the blood of that individual. This is the blood of that individual. If you want to know what the blood of that individual was, which last week, seeing that blood actually connotes life source, and that life source actually connotes conversation, the experience of the conversation. That is what we read in Deuteronomy 18:18. That is the blood of that individual. And the blood of that individual is an experience with words. Now, when we're hearing again, I'll raise them up a prophet from among thy brethren, like unto thee, my words will I put into his mouth. He will speak unto them all that I shall command him. This language should take the mind and direct the mind to to Ezekiel, to where in vision the priest Ezekiel was told to consume that I give thee, which was a roll, and written within that roll were words that were to be given afterwards. The same thing that's written here in Deuteronomy 18 is written out and fulfilled in Ezekiel 2 and 3. When we're hearing of one speaking the words of the living God, when we're hearing one speaking words commanded by the living God, when we are hearing of one being told to consume words, we're hearing the same thing. The blood of this individual, the blood of this individual is an experience of consuming words. This individual gave words. The only way that one can give words, and especially the intended words, and especially the intended words that are to be given through the stream of one's devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings, is by first consuming words. And not just any words, the words of the scriptures, and not just any words of the scriptures, what is to actually be consumed. Although those words are there, the digestion that is to take place is one that is a mixture of what is consumed and then of what is taken in. What we retain from what we consume, they are supposed to wrestle with one another. Remember, Jacob wrestled with the angel, not a literal angel. That angel symbolized the message, or a messenger, a message. We are to do as that, because as that is, so did Ezekiel, and as Ezekiel, so did that figure in Deuteronomy 18:18 do. This is that blood. And so moving from last week into this week, having discussions and conversations about what that looks like. What does it look like to consume that blood? Um, and especially hearing that it is not literal blood, the blood is figurative. It is an experience. When seeing blood, blood is representative of experience, and not just any experience, experience through tribulation, experience through suffering. Remember what was told to the Romans in chapter 5, that tribulation at the end of it all brings hope, and hope maketh not ashamed. That's really the point here. Bible doesn't just want zombies walking around. Bible doesn't just want individuals saying praise this, praise that, let's go to church, let's do this, let's do what we have to do for our charity. Let's continue to stimulate our feelings to believe we are accepted by the divine and to convince ourselves that we are maybe even divine by doing so and accepted for something greater after we die. That's not what the Bible's after. Bible's not after that. That, what I just said, is something completely different that has nothing to do with what the Bible is after. Bible is after a transformative experience that is both personal and devotional. A transformative experience that is both personal and devotional. How is it that that individual from Deuteronomy 18:18 could then speak? It is because they follow the routine of what Ezekiel did, which was to first consume. Well, the lesson there is for us because we are to individually consume the words, or I should say, the mind that is at the center of the Bible. We are to consume those words so that we, our own self, and when I say our own self, I'm saying our devotional conversations conscience, our devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings. It is supposed to give a message out to others. Who those others are, we may not know. We will discover along the way. But the marks of that wisdom gained by handling the mind within the scriptures is supposed to leave within our devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings a message to give out. A message that certain individuals along the same track as us will be able to understand for themselves so that they can then continue the trend within themselves outward to continue the trend in another so that that other can continue the trend within themselves to continue the trend outward to another, and it just continues. What's really happening is blood is being shared from one to another. And blood, again, not literal, blood being experience. The suffering of the experience for wisdom, for livelihood, both personal and devotional, is being shared. That's the end goal. And one word on that rung of Peter's ladder, the very top one of what that's called, charity. In right context, charity translates to mean benevolence, self sacrificing benevolence. When we can get to that point, because that's the end goal of what the Bible's mind is after for our devotional upbringing, that's the end goal. But the beginning is about adding virtue to what we believe. And one can only add virtue to belief by experiencing. By experiencing, not experiencing everything, because by experiencing everything, you lose what is most relevant to the individual experience, its core. Bible is very simple. The words therein are wisdom. Take those words, practically apply them. From practically applying, retain wisdom, rehash and recycle, prune, purge that wisdom, and repeat the cycle. If we are going to maintain the same experience of that individual, keeping it simple here, keeping it simple for the point of narrative, we are going to maintain the same experience, and if it is our desire to maintain the same experience of that figure who we believe is an example of something, well, then we have to understand what the example is of. And the example that is set is an example with words, and an example with words through first consuming. He wakeneth me morning by morning. He wakeneth my ear to hear as to learn. I was neither rebellious, and I did not turn back. This is from the book of Isaiah. This is in reference to that same figure from Deuteronomy 18:18. The experience is with words. The experience is with learning. The experience is with the devotional self and words, allowing the two to come together to form a relationship. And in forming that relationship, taking the journey to where it needs to be. Bible's mind is only concerned with journey. And I'm touching on this subject again due to the conversations of what does it look like to live by blood? What does it look like to drink that blood? Because now that the code of the figurative illustration is there and understood, Now we can speak in general terms. We can use that code fluently because we know what we're talking about. We're talking about an experience, one that suffers for wisdom through whatever we are retaining, testing that, examining that, letting that fail, letting that succeed, learning what worked, learning what didn't, and then coming back to the source that we got it from, the mind within the Bible, and putting onto our experience what's in there, letting what's in there school us so that we can exit back out of it, practically apply what we have retained, and just repeat the cycle all over again. That individual that is to be the example, Deuteronomy 18:18, they lived by word. That's why, again, as I quoted last week, if a man love me, he will keep my words. None of you shall taste death if you keep my saying. Death is attached to saying. Lose that saying, experience death. The death isn't literal because the saying isn't literal. We have to understand the saying in order to understand the death. And one can only understand that saying, as it says in John 7, do the doctrine and know that it is not my own and how I got it. That saying has a very specific philosophy related to the devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings, its health, its maintenance, its well being. It is through that saying, which is the same saying as we see in Ezekiel 2 and 3 of the consuming, the digesting, and then the articulating. Every single one of our conversations has a purpose. Every single one of our conversations is created, is born for a reason. Our conversation cannot reach the reason that it is supposed to reach if it does not have qualifications to be what it should in its natural aura, in its natural essence. Bible's mind wants to take the conversation through a journey of understanding itself so that it can then speak from the wisdom of that journey, the words of the scriptures being its source, as inspiration for others that should hear. We are to be a channel for one another. We are to be a stream of thought for one another. We are to be allowing our experience to be no other experience than our own, but to encourage another to have their own. Bible wants the individual human being to come into contact with their individual devotional conversation's character. That's the importance of blood. To consume that individual's blood is to consume the experience, the full experience. The full experience is suffering for the understanding of what to suffer understanding for. I die daily, says the one on that journey. I die daily, says the one on that journey. This isn't a literal death. This isn't a literal death. This is the putting to sleep former understanding by what is retained practically. When suffering for blood, when consuming blood, we are consuming an experience that is learning. We are consuming an experience that is fortifying our stimulus to keep on a self-regulated experience from learning. It is from the learning that we receive and that wisdom that we retain when handling the things that are within the Bible that fuels our devotion to its words. How does one remain strict to the words of the Bible? How does one understand the very practical commandments of the Bible? Very practical. And yet, so easily they are tarnished. How is it that the Bible could say, for example, rest is the seventh day? Yet there is an argument. Yet the one on that journey has no argument because they acknowledge what that rest is, the concept of rest. The concept of rest and the appointment for it. They're not arguing against it because they have maintained it. They have gained wisdom for it. They have gained wisdom about it, and it is that that fuels, for example, their devotion to that very, very basic saying and precept. No argument to the individual on that journey, because that journey involves rest, not lethargy, not kicking back. Rest in the philosophical context that is within the scriptures, the concept of rest being a concept of mental rejuvenation through spiritual alleviation. Only the individual conversation passing through that journey can understand, for example, the relevance of such a precept. Individual not on that journey will not be able to. And it's no different than anything else that's out there that we can think about. If, again, no one can understand the fundamentals of cooking and whatever that is unless doing it, or of swimming unless doing it, or of a sport unless doing it, or of writing unless doing it, or of anything unless doing it. And not simply just doing it, putting preconceived notions out of the mind and moving freely to let the experience unfold. That's really all the scriptures are asking the devotional conversation for, is to let the devotional conversation unfold under the supervision of words. And in letting the conversation unfold under the supervision of words, well, we don't have to do anything else. Words will take care of themselves. The devotional body will take care of itself. We don't have to think about, I always like to say, blood flowing through our veins. We don't have to think about hunger. We don't have to think about bile being formed in the stomach. We don't have to think about cognitive function, neural function. There's things that we don't have to think about, and we don't, because there's an experience for the body, there's an experience for us. There is a conscious experience, there is an unconscious experience seeping over both into one another, yet it's not felt. That's how it should be with our devotional body. So often we like to control the devotional body, we like to control it. We like to believe that the devotional body can be activated through our physical body. We like to believe that the devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings can be stimulated through our human mind, through the natural mind. But the author, writing the Corinthians, says the natural man is without sense when it comes to discerning the things concerning the scriptures. Again, this is a simple precept that cannot be understood until allowing the individual conversation to section itself out with the example blood. Or I should say, with the example devotional experience. This example devotional experience, it is given, it is witnessed throughout every book of the scriptures in its own way, but it is for the individual conversation passing through those pages to know and to understand the intended experience, how to carry the devotional body, and the point for doing so. There is an end goal. The end goal it has nothing to do with us. End goal doesn't have anything to do with us. It has everything to do with everyone that sees us and hears us. That's the end goal. Can't get to the end goal without maintaining beginning principles and understanding the starting goal. And the starting goal is adding virtue to what we believe. And to have a virtuous belief is to have a belief that is handling itself wisely. And the way that the Bible articulates how to handle the conversation wisely, how the conversation should handle itself wisely, is by handling words, by letting words work. Again, not just any words, not just words from website so and so, not just words from pastor so and so, not just words from even within our own self. Taking what these scriptures have to offer and allowing that through experience to mesh with what we believe, to receive a better portion of understanding, and to continue that cycle. The Bible's wanting to solidify a very close relationship with the devotional conversation. We just have to let it. When we can allow that to happen, then we will be able to understand what is meant by consuming the blood, taking in the life, and eating the flesh, which again is all not literal, figurative. This is philosophical in nature. And I'll end therefore right now just to touch on the dialogues since last week. Dialogues touching on what does that look like? What does that experience look like? Because if you had to go to the Paul route, which is a completely different experience, because he's the Paul from from Matthew to the Revelation, that Paul is wanting to begin a community, maintaining the life of his Christ in a sense of suffering, which plays a part in that Paul's role as a Pharisee, Pharisees originating, according to Josephus, from the Stoics. Pharisees are a Jewish Stoic sect. So there's a lot of self and self-denial in what the Paul from Matthew to the Revelation teaches, because that's the foundational core of Stoicism. Denying self in order to reach the same word as is in Stoicism, the same entity as is in Stoicism. So there's that, attacking that from the Paul side. But attacking that from the Bible side, which is always creating me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me, that can only take place by understanding working within. Remember, the kingdom of God is within you. That's a very plain statement. And then of course the narrative would contradict itself, because that's just the authors trying to make sense of what they don't really, may not fully care to make sense of or have enough to make sense of. But from Genesis to Malachi, the experience is within. That's why that statement is there. Got to have some of the real in that narrative. Creating me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. That's the story from Genesis on. Garden on. It's that renewal experience that Paul brings up in Romans 7, that he brings up in Ephesians 4. The lesson taught in the garden, the lesson taught between Abel and Cain. That same renewal experience is what the Bible's mind is after. It is what the author writing the Psalms discovered. It is what the author writing Ecclesiastes discovered. It is what the author writing the Proverbs discovered. It is the core philosophy of the scriptures is a personal relationship with words. And words, the mind of the words coming from the core of the scriptures. Should we be able to do this, separate ourselves from the experience? Well, we will be able to understand the journey and the transformation our conversation knows it needs and will do. Our conversation eventually will begin to knock and beg to be let into this experience. And should we let it? Well, we will be led into the consumption of that intended blood. So as we go through our weeks and everything that we go through, remember that intended blood. Remember that intended experience. Remember that intended journey. It is that journey that the Bible's mind wants the individual conversation to attach to remain loyal to remain faithful to. Because in the end, it is that is going to give our conversation the story, the message that it is supposed to have for someone else to hear and to be inspired to do the same for themselves.